This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Friday evening, I'm Otelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. South Korea issues a travel alert for the Thailand-Cambodia border, urging its citizens to return home, while China's foreign minister calls the casualties deeply distressing. Meanwhile, the acting Thai Prime Minister warns that the escalating clashes could spiral into war. Hong Kong police offer bounties up to tens of thousands of US dollars for more than a dozen overseas activists accused of national security crimes. With a key deadline just days away, South Korean officials say that trade talks with the U.S. are in a critical final phase. High-level meetings in Washington are underway as Seoul pushes to lock in a deal. Japan says profit sharing on a $550 billion investment fund will be based on the degree of contributions by each side, amid a lack of clarity on the initiative, the centerpiece of the U.S.-Japan trade deal. A cutthroat price war is eating up China e-commerce, with companies practically giving away everything from free food to bubble tea. What's the catch? That is the theme at this World AI Conference in Shanghai, featuring an AI voice no less, and a ton of the latest breakthroughs in the field as China steps up its AI Plus initiative to drive much-needed growth. Concerns over intensifying clashes between Thailand and Cambodia spilling over to East Asia. China has called the conflict deeply distressing, saying it stands ready to help diffuse tensions. South Korea also urging civilians to return home. Thai acting Prime Minister Phumtham Wechayachai, meantime, warns against further escalation.
เวลานี้ประเทศต้องการความสามัคคีของคนในชาติแล้วเหตุการณ์ที่กำลังเกิดขึ้นและมีลักษณะที่บุกรุกรุกล้ำแล้วก็สร้างความเสียหายกับชีวิตประชาชนนะครับอย่างที่บอกนะครับว่ามันมีลักษณะเกิดภาวะรุนแรงขึ้นนะครับมันจะพัฒนาไปสู่สงครามได้ซึ่งขณะนี้ยังถือว่าเป็นการปะทะกัน
Cambodia's foreign ministry has called Thailand's actions irresponsible and provoking further escalation and instability in the region. The United Nations Security Council is set to convene an emergency meeting, and in the meantime, Thai authorities have already rejected mediation offers from the US, China, and this year's ASEAN chair, Malaysia. Bangkok says it's looking to resolve the situation only through bilateral talks.
Some countries did mention if Thailand would like them to act as mediator, and we think it was premature because we haven't exhausted our bilateral mechanism yet.
On the ground, civilians caught in the crossfire are seeking refuge. Thai authorities say more than 100,000 civilians have been evacuated and more than a dozen people, mostly civilians, have been killed, with many more injured. On the Cambodian side, about 1,500 families have also been evacuated, and the displaced have set up camp about 30 kilometers from the border. That's according to officials. South Korea says that it has proposed a plan to the U.S. amid the tariff negotiations as the deadline for the levies to kick in gets closer. Seoul has been intensifying efforts to reach an agreement with Washington, which they say were in a critical final phase. South Korean officials are expected to meet U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer later today. South Korean media had earlier reported that Seoul will propose an investment package worth at least $100 billion to Washington that's set to involve major South Korean conglomerates such as Samsung and Hyundai. South Korea's top trade negotiators met U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick yesterday and reaffirmed the commitment to reach a deal on tariffs by the 1st of August. Now, Mr. Lutnick says that U.S. officials are fully aware of the urgency felt by South Korean officials to get a deal as pressure mounts on the country after its neighbor Japan clinched a deal with the U.S. Now, the American president has threatened to impose what he called a 25% reciprocal tariff on Seoul unless it reaches a deal before next Friday. Philippines is aiming to bring down its U.S. tariff rate to 15% from 19%. The country's ambassador to the U.S., Jose Manuel Romualdez, spoke to my colleagues on Asia First, and he believes there is room for further negotiations ahead of the August deadline.
Well, actually, the 19% was based on the same percentage that was given to Indonesia. And I think it is also to, what's the other country now? I can't, the only one that has a 10% is Singapore, but there are two other countries with 19%. And President Trump said that I can't lower it lower than what I had already given to them. However, it is clear that we can still renegotiate. It was really announced by President Trump at his Truth Social. And we expect to be able to still be able to discuss this. Our trade the head of our trade team will probably be coming back to Washington, D.C. to see how we can still manage to lower that. The White House just recently announced that, President Trump announced that the lowest he will go is 15% to any country. So we're still hoping that we will be able to bring down our level of tariff to around the same figure.
Well, Ambassador, some economists say that the deal was not balanced. How much was achieving, a balanced outcome, the strategy for the Philippines in this deal? How much did broader geopolitical security concerns like U.S.-China relations play in how the Philippines approach the negotiations?
Well, I think that the main point here is that President Trump made it clear that the tariffs, he tried to differentiate it from the tariff to whatever the defense relations that we have with the United States. However, we are bringing that in as a matter of fact, because obviously the special relations that we have with the United States on our defense alliance is an important part of this whole equation. However, like I said, it is still not a completely done deal, as pointed out, because we still have time to be able to look into possibilities of bringing it lower. But the more important one is that we will be able to identify some other areas of economic cooperation between the Philippines and the United States.
And so, Ambassador, I understand that you're still trying to renegotiate this deal, but could you also help us clarify some of the details that have come out from the most recent deal, the most recent announcement? Because President Trump has recently said on social media that the Philippines will have no tariffs on American goods, while President Marcos later said that the zero tariffs will only be on certain products. So can you tell us what has the Philippines agreed to give in the U.S. at this point?
Well, we've identified several of these items that we have spelled out during the trade talks. And Ambassador Jameson Greer, this was presented to him. And like I said, the details of this deal has not been completely disclosed, and we are still going to be able to go over it and still go one by one on the deals or on the tariffs that will be given to the United States, if there's any, on certain items, like I said, mostly agricultural products, but as mentioned by President Marcos, the automobiles are definitely one item that has already been agreed upon, that we would be importing American cars to the Philippines without any tariff.
Taiwan is holding its largest ever recall vote tomorrow. Around 1/5 of Taiwanese lawmakers, all from the main opposition party, Kuomintang, face the possibility of being removed from office. Kuomintang opposes the vote, refuting allegations that it is pro-China and anti-reform. But first, what exactly is a recall vote, and what is it about? Now, Taiwan's recall vote is driven by civic groups pushing for the removal of KMT lawmakers. Well, they're calling it an anti-communist movement, saying that the KMT lawmakers are too close to Beijing. Now, the civic groups also accuse the opposition party of acting on behalf of China to cut spending, especially the island's defense budget. The KMT, of course, denies all of this, calling this a malicious recall. They say that they are simply exercising their right to supervise the government, tackle the country's problems, and cut waste. They say they are backed by voters on this. Recalls are a constitutional right in Taiwan and can be called after the first year of a lawmaker taking office. At least 10% of registered voters in a constituency must sign a petition for this to happen. Voter turnout will be crucial to the outcome, which could in turn determine how much room President William Lai has to push his policies. CNA's Victoria Jen tells us more.
Opposing sides of Taiwan's political divide have been out in full force, rallying support in the lead up to an unprecedented mass recall vote for about a fifth of Taiwan's lawmakers. Over 6.8 million eligible voters, or about 30% of the population, are set to cast their ballots on Saturday, deciding the fate of their district's 24 lawmakers before their term is up. All are from Taiwan's biggest opposition party, the Kuomintang. Even though the presidency is held by William Lai from the Democratic Progressive Party, the KMT, together with the smaller Taiwan People's Party, won the majority of 113 seats in parliament in last year's election. DPP-backed civic groups, which initiated the recalls, have justified the move as a way to hold lawmakers accountable. They accuse KMT lawmakers of cozying up to Beijing and obstructing reforms, from defense spending to cross-strait security measures. But the KMT is pushing back hard, calling the move a malicious recall to gain control. It refutes that it is pro-China, but it says it's engaging Beijing, which has so far refused talks with Lai and labeled him a dangerous separatist. By-elections are to be held within 3 months if a recall is successful, and winning just 6 seats would give Lai and his party legislative control. So the outcome will not just decide on the fate of the 24 lawmakers, but could also shape the next 3 years of policy making. But analysts say that there could be other repercussions if the ballot does not go in the DPP's favor.
如果大罢免到了，就是说的结果不仅不如预期，而且席次是相当的低的话，譬如说1到3席，那恐怕冲击的还不是只有赖总统的威望而已，恐怕冲击的还有牵扯到民进党本身，会不会有因为这样子类似选举不利或者是罢免不利的结果，可能有一些人事上面的调整。那对于行政部门本身，就这个卓内阁是不是有要做一些调整？
A second batch of 7 KMT lawmakers are also set to face a recall vote in August. Officials in Beijing have previously called the recalls a political scheme, accusing Lai of, quote, engaging in dictatorship under the guise of democracy. The island's government has accused Beijing of clearly trying to interfere in Taiwan's democracy. Victoria Jen, CNA, Taipei.
In other news, the Supreme Court of the Philippines has struck down the impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte, saying it is unconstitutional. Well, there were 4 impeachment complaints filed against the vice president in the span of just 3 months. The most recent one was filed earlier this year, accusing Ms. Duterte of misusing public funds, amassing unusual wealth, and threatening to kill President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. However, the Supreme Court says the ruling does not absolve Ms. Duterte of the charges. The court's decision only means that Ms. Duterte is safe from possible ousting until February 2026. Now, this gives the vice president more time to garner support as she prepares for a potential presidential run in the 2028 elections. For more, Buena Bernal, she joins us live now from Manila. Buena, first up, tell us more about the court's verdict.
Well, in nullifying the articles of impeachment against the sitting embattled Vice President Sara Duterte, the Philippine Supreme Court, sitting en banc, essentially said that these government processes cannot be Machiavellian. Now, the text or the full text of the decision has not yet been officially released, but the Philippine Supreme Court spokesperson Camille Ting did quote the decision as saying, quote, "Our fundamental law is clear. She said the end does not justify the means. There is a right way to do the right things at the right time. Now, that decision in particular was in relation to a constitutional provision that mandates that Philippine impeachment proceedings or no Philippine impeachment proceedings shall be initiated against the same official more than once within a year. You can find that Article 11, Section 3.5 of the Philippines 1987 Constitution, and this has always been part of the technical defense, at the very least, of the Vice President's legal team. Now, if you recall, last June 10, the Philippine Senate, sitting as the impeachment court, actually returned the articles of impeachment to the lower chamber of Congress, the House of Representatives, where over 1/3 voted to impeach the Vice President, and the Senate then said that we require from you a certificate saying essentially that you complied with this constitutional provision, because an ally of the Vice President, Senator Bato de la Rosa, did raise that issue before the Senate that convened as an impeachment court last June 10. And now you see these government processes among the three branches of the Philippine government working to deal with this very issue that has been raised by the Vice President's legal team.
And Buena, to what extent will the running of the country and cabinet be impacted by this?
Well, Vice President Sara Duterte had already resigned from the Philippine cabinet, part of her symbolic gesture to actually express disdain against the sitting president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The two did run together, were allies in the presidential bid of Mr. Marcos 3 years ago, but had a falling out. And that political fallout, many analysts argue, has led to this impeachment process. But her legal team Friday afternoon welcomed this decision from the Supreme Court, saying that it showed that the court upheld the rule of law and initiated these measures against the abuse of the impeachment process. However, certain rights groups, including rights group I Defend, decried the delay. They called it a delay by the Senate, and that they decried that the court simply acted based on a technicality. Incoming Congressman Chel Jokno, who will represent the party Akbayan that was among the filers of the first 3 impeachment complaints prior to the 4th one that was pursued eventually, also saying that this is a loss for the Philippine nation, this is a loss for accountability. But of course, in relation to these allegations of fund misuse, including the use of fictitious names to as fake beneficiaries, supposedly by the Office of the Vice President and by the Department of Education when she headed it, these allegations can still be pursued in Philippine courts, separate from this impeachment process that the Philippine Supreme Court now says can be initiated after a year, considering that 1-year ban under the Philippine Constitution. And initially, people were actually expecting the impeachment proceedings to start by August, after the new Congress, the 20th Congress, convenes this coming July 28th. But now with this decision, it's a wait and see, because a motion for reconsideration, that's essentially an appeal on this decision, can still be filed. And it's a wait and see how the Supreme Court will vote on that appeal.
Buena Banal in Manila, thanks for that report. Well, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up in East Asia tonight, from Kia to Volkswagen, automakers struggle in the face of President Trump's tariff hikes. Plus, tech firms converging in Shanghai to showcase their artificial intelligence innovations and support China's booming AI sector. Hello again, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and it is now time to get you up to speed on our business news with Olivia Mazuku, who has been very busy following the latest on US-Japan trade deals. So, Liv, as we all know, in return of lower tariffs, Japan promised to invest up to $550 billion in US projects. But is there a catch there?
There is, I'll tell you. So basically, the investment will include projects such as semiconductor and medicine, and The White House is suggesting that Tokyo is only getting a fraction of the profits. So Japan is pushing back on that idea, saying that profits from the U.S. investment should be shared based on the degree of contributions made by each side. Washington has reached a pact with Japan this week to lower its tariff rate to 15%. At the heart of the deal is Tokyo's pledge to set up a $550 billion U.S. investment fund. The structure of the scheme remains largely unclear, but the White House said it would keep 90% of the profits from that scheme, leaving just 10% for Japan. But a Japanese government official has clarified that and saying that the final split should reflect each other's actual financial contribution and the level of risk. That suggests that the investment scheme should involve substantial contributions, not just from Japan, but also from the U.S. government or companies. Even as the basic elements of the fund are being thrashed out, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warned this week that the U.S. would monitor the implementation of the deal and bump up the rate to 25% if President Trump is not satisfied. Core consumer inflation in Tokyo has slowed but stayed well above the central bank's 2% target, renewing hopes for another rate hike this year. CPI in Japan's capital city rose 2.9% in July on year, slightly below market forecast. That is down from 3.1% inflation in June. The slowdown is largely due to base effect from the rise in energy prices last year, after Tokyo removed subsidies in order to curb fuel bills. Analysts expect the cost of living to continue slowing in the coming months as the nation rides out the effect from the hike in utility costs as the spike in rice prices ease. The inflation data will be among factors that the Bank of Japan will scrutinize at its meeting next week. Well, equity markets in the country closing in the red as traders locked in gains spurred by a newly inked trade deal with the U.S. The Nikkei 225 slid by nearly 1%, trimming a weekly advance that brought the index to a brink of a record. And the wider topics hit an all-time high yesterday, but it dropped by the same margin as of today. And in the foreign and the currency space there, the yen is hovering at 147.8 level to the greenback. China's government land sales have continued to fall, but at a slower rate as the country tries to revitalize its real estate market. Data from the finance ministry showed that revenue fell 6.5%. That is in the first half of the year. This compares with an 11.9% drop in the January to May period. Land sales are a major fiscal pillar for local governments, which are tasked with developing local economies while reining in debt risks. But sales have dropped significantly in the last 3 years due to cash-strapped developers reducing purchases amid a prolonged market slump. And Chinese stocks taking a breather from their recent rally, with Shanghai and Shenzhen on the mainland finishing the session in the red, about 0.3% for Shanghai. Hong Kong's Hang Seng leading the way down more than 1% decline by the closing bell. On the bright side, though, they are still registering another record week of gains for the fifth straight week. Traders locked in some gains ahead of a Politburo meeting expected to set the economic policy for the rest of the year. Well, shares of Korean automaker Kia slipped by more than 2% at one stage before trimming some of those losses at the close. The world's third largest automaker reported a disappointing Q2 earnings. Its operating profit fell 24% on year to around $2 billion in the June quarter, and the company highlighted a $570 million hit due to Trump tariffs. Sales to the U.S. actually increased by 5% thanks to solid demand for its Carnival hybrid SUVs. And that came as American consumers rushed to buy vehicles ahead of the expected price hikes. Still, those gains were insufficient to offset tariff-related losses. Now, this highlights the ongoing challenges for global automakers amid rising trade tensions. The rising costs for manufacturers will potentially send prices higher for end consumers. Now, many automakers are reassessing their supply chains and pricing strategies to navigate these uncertainties. And Kia's not alone there. Volkswagen also taking a hit from Trump tariffs. The German auto giant says the impact of those levies cost the company $1.5 billion in the first half of the year. It's reported a shrinking operating profit in Q2 of around $4.5 billion. That's a decline of 29% on year. And Europe's biggest automaker also cutting its revenue and profit outlook, warning of political uncertainty and increased barriers to trade. Operating return on sales is now expected to range between 4 to 5%, down from a previous forecast of 5.5 to 6.5%. Caught in the crosshairs of President Trump's trade salvo on Europe, Volkswagen and its peers are pressing European trade negotiators to strike a deal to replace a 25% tariff on their cars in place since April. And that's all for your TGIF business news.
Appreciate that very much. Thanks so much for that, Olivia. Well, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up on East Asia Tonight, South Korea's education ministry says medical students who boycotted classes in protest last year will be allowed to return to campus in the upcoming autumn semester. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China says clashes between Thailand and Cambodia are deeply distressing, and South Korea calls on citizens in the conflict areas to come home. Meantime, South Korean officials say trade talks with the U.S. are in their critical final phase. The clock is ticking as the two sides meet in Washington to secure a deal before the 1st August deadline. And Japan says profit sharing on a $550 billion investment fund will be based on the degree of contributions by each side, amid a lack of clarity on the initiative, a centerpiece of the U.S.-Japan trade deal. South Korean medical students who boycotted classes in protest last year will be allowed to return to campus. The Education Ministry announced the decision today, saying that the students will be able to return in the upcoming autumn semester with few restrictions. Thousands of medical students walked out of school in early 2024 to oppose a plan by the previous administration under Yoon Suk-yeol to add thousands of new spots at medical schools. The trainee doctors had argued that the increase would lower the quality of medical education and said more reform was needed for the whole sector. Hong Kong police are issuing bounties of up to $1 million Hong Kong dollars for information about more than a dozen overseas activists accused of national security crimes. Police say that the 19 activists were involved in what they called a subversive organization known as Hong Kong Parliament. It's a pro-democracy NGO based in Canada, and they've accused of trying to overthrow and undermine the Chinese and Hong Kong authorities. The activists are wanted for 200,000 Hong Kong dollars each, or about 25,000 US dollars, or some are wanted for 1 million. Well, that's more than 125,000 US dollars. Now, the bounties are seen as largely symbolic because they affect people living in countries unlikely to extradite political activists to Hong Kong or China. Free milk tea and up to 200 million deliveries in a single day. Hard to believe, right? But it's all true and looks set to continue as a cutthroat price war in China's so-called instant retail sector shows no signs of abating. And this has not only sparked delivery mania, but warnings from the country's top market regulator. But how did things get to this stage? Well, this all started when e-commerce platform JD.com launched its food delivery service in February. It's a space dominated by Meituan, which has a 65% market share. The food delivery giant countered in April with a flash shopping program that promised deliveries within half an hour. JD.com then announced a $1.4 billion subsidy program for food delivery discounts. And earlier this month, another round of investment. Now, that came shortly after Alibaba joined the fray, unveiling plans to invest close to $7 billion in discounts and subsidies. Meituan, not to be outdone, offering coupons that slashed prices even further. For more on this delivery mania in China, CNA's Deborah Wong joins us in Hong Kong. Now, Deborah, I know that you always like to have a good deal, and tell us, what is your own experience looking for deals, and is it as simple as users make it out to be?
I find some deals quite easy to get because when you open the platform straight away, you're already seeing reduced prices on the platforms, and you can just access it quite easily. But some deals are a little bit harder to get. You have to maybe wait till the weekend, and sometimes they also come in a limited quota. So you really have to pick the right time to do it. For more, I actually did a show and tell about how these apps work. Have a look.
With so many delivery platforms and intensifying price wars to win market share, many users here in China, like myself, have been spending a fair bit of time on our phones to not just figure out the different types of coupons on offer, but the best combinations to get the best deals. One free bubble tea? You've got to work for it. Here's what I found. Take e-commerce platform Alipay for instance. You could get a free meal if you know where to get the right coupon at the right time. First, head to Ele.me, which is their delivery platform. And if you're a new user, you get a cashback of 1650 yuan or 230 USD. I can even buy Peking duck for less than half the price. But some of these offers are time sensitive, just like this snack on Meituan that's going for as low as 0.1 yuan, and that's roughly around 0.014 US cents. As you can see, time is ticking, less than 1.5 minutes to go before the discount is over. Users on Chinese social media platforms like Weibo and Xiaohongshu are even posting hacks daily to show you how to snag the best prices on various platforms. Want free drinks? Here's how to get it.
就是第一天你只需要花个1块多就可以点单，然后第二天花个3块多，然后第3天就可以实现奶茶免单了。
Some even found that if you switch your location from a big city to a smaller city, you'll get higher value coupons.
据说，如果把大城市的定位切换成小城市，就可以膨胀出更高的神券。那我自己亲测下来，确实西安的优惠力度是要比北京大很多的，大家也可以去试一下。
Whichever app you're on, you see this big flashing word 抢, telling you to grab the deals before time or stock runs out.
The question is, how much longer can this price war go on for? And does it always benefit the consumer?
So some great deals there, Deborah, but it seems like you do need fast fingers to snag that deal. Not so easy after all. Based on talking to other consumers, what are they saying to you?
Well, people are willing to go the extra mile to save money. Some of them are willing to spend some time to play the games, to go through advertisements to really just to get a free meal. And they're also willing to spend consecutively to get a free drink. And I think this is not surprising. Given the trade war, there's a lot of consumer uncertainty. People want to save money. They're even sharing hacks on social media on how to do so. Take a listen.
这段时间的话是用那个闪购比较多一些，会每个平台都看一下同一个商品，然后这个平台多少钱，那个平台多少钱，然后哪一个平台价格低一点，我会在哪个平台下单。
价格便宜了嘛，然后券也比较多，之前可能一单减5、6块钱的券，然后现在可能有10块钱、15块钱的券都有，所以相反那个外卖大战之后花的钱更少了。
我点进去那个软件嘛，点个软件，然后他们上面就有一些，有的时候就蹦出一点小广告。 小活动，然后你就去点进去，然后进去了解一下，然后我就是通过这种手段去，也算是薅羊毛吧。
So, Deborah, I believe that you have a guest with you to help us make sense of all the dollars and cents.
That's right, Ateli. I'm joined by Gary Ng. He's a senior economist here in Natixis in Hong Kong. Now, Gary, thank you for joining me here. Food delivery giant Meituan, they've been the de facto leader in this industry for a while now. They've called this price war irrational, but they're still joining the frenzy. What do you think this says about the state of the Chinese economy right now?
Well, I would say that the number one concern that we can see from what is happening right now is really about this continuous weakening demand demand and the inability for firms to actually raise prices, because that will make the companies very, very difficult to really compete for growth, and also about, all this future profitability that one can imagine. And second, beyond the macro picture that we can see here, it is also about the usual corporate behavior that companies tend to behave in China versus other countries, that is all about making the firm as big as possible to gain as many market share as possible. So this is why Meituan would have said that even though this price war may not be irrational, but if all the competitors, they are doing the same thing, they will need to continue because they need to retain their market leading position. So I think this explains why we see China is actually undergoing price war, at least in a number of sectors that we see right now.
And China's top market regulators actually called these three platforms to warn them to keep, competition rational. But do you think this kind of top-down approach is going to change things?
Well, I would say yes and no, because, and of course, we do see that there's a new regulations being published about how companies should set their prices, etc., which is a bit hard to really talk about the ultimate outcome right now. But it shows that from a top-down level, there is a greater concern for the Chinese government to really cater this trend, which is called the involution, because if prices continue to stay weak, it is not really beneficial for the economy as a whole. But having said that, because of what we have seen, even though it may not be, very rational to compete that way, I just feel that because of the macro reality that we see right now, and because of the company behavior, it's probably quite hard for us to really see the end of price war anytime soon. It will really take one thing to end that will be the greater demand in China.
Right. And, this price war has also taken a toll on the riders. We spoke to some of them who told us that even though consumers, they do get incentives to perhaps buy more products, the riders don't get any additional incentives. Have a listen.
哪个平台给的单价高，我就是说利益能最大化，就是说我就会跑哪个平台，因为它是属于像我这种众包的骑手，就属于这种非常自由的，因为它单量多了嘛，平均比如说你1个小时，以前平均1个小时送4单，现在你1个小时能送5单，就是多一单多出了8块钱，比如说你8个小时就多了60多块钱，同样的工作时间就钱就多了嘛。
单量对于专送来说，我感觉是也就提升了10%左右，因为我们都是派单率来，是系统派单给我们来的，然后再相对于来说，大站的话，它的系统可能会更繁杂一些，就是有时候它会从不同的地方取餐，就比较乱，是吧？所以说导致我们就比较累一点。
Gary, when we talk about nature or involution, the Chinese EV sector, electric vehicle sector, is still the biggest aggravator. They talk about perhaps improving the quality to compete, but they're not breaking the cycle anytime soon. How do you think that's going to affect global trade imbalances?
Well, I would say in the short run, it is a very difficult problem to disentangle. The number one reason is simply because when we look at the way that Chinese companies behave, beyond the macro reality that we have already talked about, another thing is really about the race to subsidies. So we have seen over the past 5-10 years, there's a very, very strong focus from the government in really helping all these Chinese firms to excel in the EV industry. This is why we see, there are many leaders in electric vehicles, battery, etc. But at the same time, if there's not really a very strong demand actually picking up, then China will need someone to consume all this car beyond the domestic demand. So I think this is where we do see this global tension coming in, because of course, on the one hand, there are certain countries such as Germany, they would face greater pressure from China, given their leadership in the automobile industry for many, many years. But at the same time, whether these firms would have equal market access in China, I think it is something very, very important for the Chinese government to really think about when it go to the question of the trade tension. So to me, if there's like a more broader demand side policy, rather than only supporting the supply of Chinese firms, this will be something quite helpful for China, at least in reducing certain this imbalance between demand and supply, and also this global tension.
Right. You know, the intense competition is also generating a lot of overcapacity, and trade partners are quite wary about it. What is China doing about this?
Well, I think what we have seen so far is that China is willing to invest more overseas, bringing certain technology towards other places, so that it doesn't end up in a situation it's only China exporting towards other country, but not creating jobs in other locations. So I think this is something that China has been doing. But whether this is fully enough, maybe not so much, because I think, as we have talked about, it is really about this demand. And China has been supporting its local firms with local demands for many years in the EV industry. And right now, it has already created like a barrier for some of the foreign firms to enter. Then, of course, we can think of some maybe better performer like Tesla, etc. But whether all the access is equal to all the global firms, I think if China can really solve this problem and also support itself with the demand side policy, this will be something that is very beneficial in easing part of this trade imbalance and also global tension.
Right. Thank you very much, Gary. And this is Gary Ng, the senior economist at Natixis, Hong Kong. Vitaly.
Hey, thanks so very much for that. CNA's Deborah Wong in Hong Kong, as well as her guest. Now, we are going to go for a short break now, but coming up on East Asia tonight, China set to reveal some of its latest breakthroughs in AI technology as a 3-day World AI Conference begins in Shanghai tomorrow. China is gearing up to showcase its latest breakthroughs in artificial intelligence as a 3-day World AI Conference begins in Shanghai tomorrow. Now, this year's theme is Global Solidarity in the AI Era. Just days earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump laid out a blueprint to relax rules governing the American AI industry. All this as part of a renewed push to win the global AI race over China. CNA's Tan Yu-Guan has more.
Say artificial intelligence, and these futuristic images may come to mind. But in China, AI is also being used to power something more down to earth. This is the launch of Shanghai's first cross-border legal services platform, an initiative by the city's Xuhui district, a key downtown business zone. Firms describe their legal needs through an app, and through AI get matched to a suitable lawyer from a global panel. This process takes under an hour and is accessible at any time, making it easier for those looking to set up in the district or venture abroad.
之前我们经常会遇到的是企业有一个需求，可能他们要通过好几层的联系，比方说联系朋友、联系律师，然后律师再联系到相应法域的一个律师，这样子一个繁琐的过程。那么通过目前全球1小时响应计划的话，这一个点就能得到他们想要的所有法域的答案。
Such AI applications and more are expected to be in focus at the World AI Conference in Shanghai, as the virtual singer in this year's theme song notes.
AI in schools and farms in our hands, transforming cities, reviving the land.
Over 800 firms, including big local names, SenseTime, Ant Group, and Deep Robotics are taking part. It will also feature 3,000 exhibits, from intelligent robots to other AI-powered devices. To give you an idea of the scale this year, the exhibition will take place over there, in a space that spans a record 10 football fields. It all comes at a time when China and the US are locked in a race to be global leaders in AI. But they may well be running in different lanes. The US is more focused on developing artificial general intelligence, or getting a machine to perform more like a human brain, while China is more focused on applying AI to solve real-world problems. It's part of China's broader AI Plus initiative to integrate the disruptive technology with more parts of society. It received a renewed push last year after being mentioned in the government work report as China seeks to make AI a new driver for economic growth. This year's gathering also takes place after homegrown firm DeepSeek generated much buzz globally with its open-source AI large language model earlier this year. It has since been joined or even surpassed by other models like Kimi by Moonshot AI, backed by Chinese giant Alibaba. Tan Yu-Guan, CNA, Shanghai.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed Friday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia and look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Well, have a great weekend. See you again.